pre-workshop question. So we do these before and after the workshop, just to give us a sense of, you know, what worked, what didn't, if we need to change any curriculum for next year. So the question for today is, I am familiar with the various ways that my organization could deliberate on important decisions. If you definitely agree with that, that is letter A. Again, you can either text the letter A to the number on the screen or just select it on your web browser. Excuse me. If you mostly agree with this, that is letter B. If you're not sure, that's letter C. If you are mostly not familiar, then you would select D. And if you definitely are not familiar with various ways that your organization can deliberate on important issues, that is the letter E. And it looks like we're getting some good responses. So, okay, cool. So we're mostly confident about this. We are going to be getting into the weeds on this. So hopefully I'm not boring anybody who definitely agrees with this, but our next question is, I would feel comfortable dealing with a member of my organization who is acting in a disruptive or inappropriate manner during our meetings. This is a very real problem that I'm sure we've all faced, and not all of us are great at dealing with it. So if you definitely feel comfortable with disruptive people, that is letter A. If you mostly feel comfortable, that's B. If you're not sure, that's letter C. If you are mostly not comfortable, that's letter D. And if you are definitely not comfortable dealing with folks in your meetings who are acting disruptive or inappropriately, that is the letter E. All right, so yep, we're a little bit more split on this. It's definitely a something you learn over the years, many years of doing this, and you still can learn new ways of dealing with people. So cool. All right, so we are mostly yes on this, but definitely more split evenly. So I'm going to be asking you, this question is going to be a poll everywhere prompt. So just consider what your response to this is while I'm describing it, and then we'll have a chance to respond to that in the next slide. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of kick off this conversation with is, why do you think it's important to set rules and standards for group meetings? So really consider, you know, what meetings and projects have succeeded that you've been a part of, and ones that could be more successful. You can also think, you know, if you are or have been in a leadership position, what are some issues that you've faced facilitating meetings and projects? And if you have not been in leadership, if you're just a group member or somebody working on a project, think of some ways that you feel those could be improved, either by rules, better facilitation, whatever it might be. So this is same process as before, except instead of selecting a letter, you're just going to type in your response either on the web browser in a little text box, or if you're on text message, you'll just text in your response. And again, those instructions are on the screen here. The other thing I should say, so I'm going to move past this slide. And if you have not, if you hadn't had a chance to respond to it, it will still be open for a while. So if you have anything else that you want to contribute that we can take a look at later on, you can still respond to it even after I've moved past this slide. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Yeah, everyone is on the same page. Definitely important. Yep, making the conversation as productive as it can be. I like this: to have unity, social justice, diversity of opinion brings truth to the forefront. And it's important for us to figure out how to embrace that diversity of opinions. Higher ranking might attempt to take over a meeting. That's definitely an issue. Prioritizing respect and boundaries, expectation setting. These are some really good suggestions, and pretty much exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm glad that everybody's in the same space. It would be helpful if everyone listened to everyone's brainstorming ideas. Every idea is a good one. It's really important. We're going to talk a little bit about some facilitation techniques that that you can use to make sure that everybody feels like they have a voice. Somebody's saying hi. All right. Um, so the first thing we're going to talk about is formalizing group dynamics. So I should have said before, we have this packet of interpersonal and group rules supplementary materials. This is also included in your email. I'm going to be referencing it a couple times throughout the presentation. So if you do have it, please take that out. Um, so in order to formalize group dynamics, it's really important for us to have rules for discussion so that we're all kind of playing with the same set of rules. Really understanding, these are our expectations of how members will conduct themselves. The next thing is deciding how you come to decisions. So, some decisions might require deliberation from the entire body of a group, or it might be something that somebody who's a project manager can make decisions on their own. Charting the course for your work. This is really important. Understanding what your group's focuses are going to be and how you prioritize those. It's very important to set that out with the entire group so that everybody feels like they have buy-in. And the last thing here is establishing meeting procedures. So really nailing down how you conduct meetings and move through your group's business. Um, in this packet, we have some sample group rules. That's the first 2 pages that you can reference. It's really just sort of trying to set out, this is how we expect our members to conduct themselves in order for us to be productive. So our next thing is deciding how to decide. So it's important to kind of understand, okay, some decisions might need everybody to agree, or some decisions might just require a majority of people to agree. And you might want to consider when these different things would be appropriate in what types of deliberations. So the first method, and I'm just going to be giving a couple definitions here. The first method is consensus. This is when you discuss a course of action with the group until you come up with a solution that everybody agrees with. This can either be a hard consensus, meaning that everybody gives an affirmative yes, or it can be a soft consensus where nobody specifically objects or blocks a proposal. So, you might say, all right, well, I don't really want to do it, but I'm not going to stand in your way if that's what y'all want to do. Plurality is just when you have multiple options, more than two, and the one with the most votes wins out. Simple majority would mean that that the winning one would have to have at least one vote more than half of the votes. And a supermajority is when you set some threshold. It might be 2/3, it might be 3/4 for a body to decide. That might be, just as an example, if you're dealing with financial issues, that might require a supermajority where you would want to make sure that everybody is really strongly agrees on, we should spend the rest of this grant money on a pizza party. That might want to have 75% of the vote saying yes.
This is the best day. What?
It is the best day. Thank you. I'm having a great
Michael,
time.
this is Teresa. I just wanted to say something on that last slide. When you're talking about deciding how to decide, and I'm going to be popping in to kind of support Michael every once in a while here. So if you hear from me, that's why. But I just wanted to touch on consensus a little bit more. Consensus, sometimes it depends upon the type of group you have or what the group has decided. That if your consensus is more of a hard consensus, I think that, you kind of already called that out with everybody has to agree, everybody has to totally be okay. And then that soft consensus, we're just like, meh, all right, I guess. But the hard consensus, I was a part of the Edible Flint board for a long time, well, for a long time, for a couple of years. And we always had to have a hard consensus for some of the kind of work group things that we would discuss. And so, that was something that we all agreed on. And that hard consensus sometimes can build relationships and help you to talk through some of the reasonings that people might have for or against something. So hard consensus can be it can be challenging because it takes longer to get through the work or get through the conversation, but it sometimes can lead to some really nice relationship building, and you might come up with um, some other options. So anyhow, I just wanted to add a little bit for that.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's a really great point when you, and we're going to go over a little bit of some of the procedural things, but consensus building is really, it is about the conversation. It is about, making sure that everybody's voices feels heard, and that you're really being respectful of the diversity of opinions, which somebody called out earlier. So thank you for that, Teresa. The next thing we're going to talk about is charting the course for your work. So this is sort of, we can call it different names. The Engagement Hub does annual action planning. That's sort of a similar concept to this, where you have a discussion, figure out what issues you're trying to address, prioritize those issues, and come up with specific action items, identifying who's going to be responsible, what roles people are going to be taking, and establishing how and when you'll make decisions. So harkening back to that last slide, figuring out, okay, well, if we're making decisions about budget stuff, then that needs to be done with the entire group. Or you might say, all right, well, if you're managing this project and you have the checkbook, you can write checks up to $100, but anything more than that, you'll need to come back to the group so that we can all talk about that. So again, that's just part of, sort of the figuring out what the roles and responsibilities are. Some roles might have a little bit more ability to make decisions unilaterally.
And when and Michael, when you're talking about the charting the course of your work or your work proposal, you might have also heard the terms action plan or work plan. So really, it doesn't matter what you call it, as long as you are kind of still including those components and making sure you know what we're working on, who's working on it, and when it's due. But
Right.
you might hear it be called a few different things if you're out there looking for any kind of templates.
Yeah, and the materials that Ashley put together for, I believe that was the second or the first night, you can reference those meeting materials, have a lot of really great information about how to come up with, smart goals, working towards those with groups. So this next thing, establishing meeting procedures. You might find in your group that you need more or less structure. If you find that in your meetings you have a lot of crosstalk, or decision making is really difficult, you might want to consider making a more formal procedure for conducting business. If your group is pretty like laissez-faire, go as you will, you might not need that much structure, and you can just tune out the rest of this. So I'm going to give a couple examples of some different styles of meetings, some different types of meeting procedures. I'm going to describe these in very like, this is what this is what that is. It doesn't have to be like we're going all in on this. Robert's Rules is an insanely complex series of rules and regulations, and like you can adopt portions of that to conduct business, but you don't need to go through all of the, this is the process for debating a motion, et cetera. You might say, well, we work really well when we have that sort of meeting structure according to Robert's Rules, but we can make decisions by consensus rather than making a motion, seconding, debating, et cetera. So the first one we're going to talk about is Robert's Rules. Again, I'm going to reference our materials packet. I put together a description of all of the different procedures. So we have a lot more detailed information in here. I tried to make it like still legible and not just like complete jargon. So hopefully that's helpful. So Robert's Rules is a very strict set, like I mentioned, that structures debate and passage of proposals through a majority vote. So again, that's 50% of the group plus one. In this method, motions are presented and they're either seconded or they are rejected. If they are seconded, members then debate the motion and again, vote either yes or no. And there are at least a dozen different types of motions and deliberative mechanisms that we're just not going to get into. But I thought that this was a helpful sort of flow chart here, where it's really just laying out, this is our agenda. We start the meeting by reading the minutes, we approve the minutes, we hear the treasurer's report or any other committees, and then we work through new business. So a lot of groups have adopted that as sort of the meeting structure, but making decisions in different different ways from just the yes, no, up, down kind of thing. So the next thing we're going to talk about is consensus decision making. This is one version of consensus decision making that I think is sort of a helpful model. Like we were saying before, this really encourages each member to participate and to feel empowered in the decision making process. So this is about, bringing up an idea, really discussing it, and before coming up with a proposal, you have that discussion, you hear what everybody has to say, and based on that, you come up with a proposal. If everybody says yes, that's great, then we can say, all right, job done, consensus achieved, what are we going to do about that? If not everybody agrees, then that means that you listen to the concerns, you incorporate those into the discussion, and then you create a new proposal. In this diagram that we have here, this is a method in which you would need, if one person decides to block a proposal, then that's it, it's done. You're not going to move forward with that proposal as it stands. That means that you again have to go back to discussion and try to figure out what's going to make everybody happy.
And
oh yeah.
Yeah, and then for consensus, I guess, oh, thank you for going back to that. I was just like, oh, what was I thinking about? Now I forgot what I was about to say. Oh no. I guess, okay. So for one, I guess I'll give an example for consensus. So some of you who have done some work with me know that we had a coalition called SAGE. It's a group of advocates that all, strive to make the space, make our spaces more livable, walkable, et cetera. And we did have more of a consensus model. And so when you're talking about consensus, sometimes if the discussion continues to go and go and go, you can almost feel like you're going in a little circle. So like Michael said, you can get to that concerns raised section and decide, no, we don't want to move forward. We want to go back to discussion and back to figuring out a solution. So one way to sort of help with that is to give a group a certain amount of time and say, we need to reach consensus within this amount of time on our agenda. And if we don't, we can decide if we want to table that and discuss it again later. We can decide that we're just going to pass on that idea completely if consensus just absolutely cannot be reached. But so it may be helpful to just think about that if you have a longer meeting going on, or if the discussion is really starting to just kind of go nowhere in a way. Just giving a time limit might be helpful.
Yeah, and that tees up the next point really, really well. So this is dynamic facilitation is sort of it's a little bit more of an out there, less structured, more how are we all feeling kind of mode of facilitation, which I think it can actually be extremely effective in instances like what Teresa is mentioning, where you just find yourself talking in circles. This is a method of facilitation where you really are calling on all of your participants to bring their energy, bring their ideas and their perspectives, and to full-throatedly get those out there. This is about hearing what everybody's ideas are, and then through that process of facilitation, allowing proposals to come up sort of organically. Like if you sense the energy of the room is stuck on this one point, everybody keeps coming back to this thing, you can hear what people have said about that and try to incorporate it into an actual proposal. This is something, it has a name, it has a set sort of theory behind it, but it honestly is just having a conversation, right? It's having a conversation which everybody feels like they can say what they want, and everybody has a space and is empowered to say what they want. And it's really about the facilitator kind of reflecting back on what people are saying, actively listening, making sure that they understand, restating, this is what I hear you say, can you clarify? And again, sort of letting the consensus come out organically.
And in this dynamic facilitation, sometimes, trust plays a really big role in this, because the more people feel safe and as if they and that they trust the rest of the group, the more they're willing to really engage in that conversation. And this kind of style can also foster trust. So you might start off with it not with some people maybe shy to contribute, but if you keep using this kind of a system, sometimes that can help them feel more comfortable. So I'd be curious to see if anybody feels like they use this kind of structure.
Yeah, and something I like about this too is that it's really about creating a shared understanding of what the issue is. Again, if everybody has a voice in saying, this is how I see this problem, then you can really create like a much more fertile ground for exploration if everybody understands this is where we stand on this issue. And you can do that by, we get into a little bit in the facilitation sheet here, but coming up with what are our suggested solutions, A, what are our concerns, B, and what is the sort of data, like what are the hard facts on this, and really sort of working from there to come up with your proposals. So I'm going to ask you another question here. So the question is, how do we deal with difficult personalities? So when you're coming up with this answer, consider ways that you've dealt with people who have been disruptive in either meeting settings or just in general over the course of conducting business. Think about what some common interpersonal issues are, and whether there's ways that you've dealt successfully with them in the past. So again, we're going to bring it open to the poll everywhere question. If you missed it before, excuse me, there's instructions here on how you can respond to the question on the screen, either by going to pollev.com and entering the word COF community, or by texting the word COF community to the number 22333 and then texting in your response.
And if you are able, you can also click on the link to the website in the chat. I just put that in there for you.
Thank you, Teresa. Having compassion and listening. Absolutely. Active listening, I think, is probably the number one way that I have learned to deal with difficult conversation, is just by making sure that we're on the same page, right? That we both understand what each other's perspectives are, and that that way you can come up with a solution. Don't take it personally. Great answer. To whoever just texted COF community, congratulations, you are set up and you can enter your actual response now. If personalities clash, we won't be able to positively work together. That is absolutely true. Being a good listener and hearing, whoops, sorry about that. We'll come back to it. For personalities clash, we won't be able to positively work together. Being a good listener and hearing one another out. Developing a parking lot for issues, that's a really good technique. And again, that can sort of come back to coming up with proposals for a group, how you're going to conduct meetings. You can come up with those little structures of like, this is how we're going to deal with things that we don't have time for in the meeting, things like that. Acknowledging concern and asking for solution. That's very similar to the participation agreement. Bring constructive attitude. Let's think about what we can do rather than what we can't do. Make sure they know they're being heard. Yep. Don't let them bait you. Yep. Parking lot. Don't indulge. Yeah, that person is definitely, they've been to some meetings for sure. Awesome. So again, this is going to stay open and we're going to revisit it after we've gone through a couple of these prompts. So you can still respond to this question once I move past the slide. All right. So the first thing, whoops, is that, yep. First thing is, if you are leading or you're in a leadership role, or you're facilitating a meeting or a project, consider what your duty is. So listening to understand, don't just, pretend to listen. People most always can tell that you aren't actually listening to them. being sure to restate points as you hear them, asking clarifying questions if you need to, staying in your role. It might not always be your place to offer opinions during group deliberation. People might see that as you being biased and that you are actually trying to lead the discussion to a specific outcome. So sometimes it's best to just sort of take a step back and see where the discussion goes on its own. Don't be defensive. I think this is sort of similar to don't indulge, like don't let them have that, right? If you are reacting to a situation by lashing out, you might risk losing respect of your group members. So really trying to take that step back and considering how can I respond to this in a way that isn't going to be perceived as a confrontation. So let's go through a couple different types of personalities that we might deal with. So the first one is the disruptor. This is a person who consistently goes off topics. They bring up the same thing over and over again, and they challenge you on how your meeting is being run. The one solution for this is to return to that agenda and those group rules. Again, this is one reason why it's a great idea to sort of gather those rules from the group itself and making sure that everybody agrees to them, so that you can go back and say, oh, well, you agreed that you were going to act this way, and it seems right now like you're not doing that. So let's consider that, the other thing you can do here is really letting the group decide. So bringing the point of discussion or conflict, bringing that up to the membership of your group and letting them decide whether they are following the agenda or the ground rules. That way, again, you're not engaging with it in a personal way, like this is my beef with you. This is the group standard that you may or may not be meeting, right? The next personality is the bully. This is somebody who tries to intimidate you, makes you or your members feel upset or undermined, or they're just creating general tension in the room. So again, going back to those rules that you've already set up and your decision-making processes, remind them again that they agreed to this, that once a decision is made by the group, that's it. They can take it or leave it, but that's what it is. You can't keep revisiting the same problem over and over again if you've already decided how you're going to deal with it. The other thing here is to just be honest about what's happening and to acknowledge that they are creating tension. Sometimes you can make a joke. Sometimes you just say, look, I see you, I know what you're doing right now, and I'm going to continue doing this. So, do you. The next personality is the naysayer. So this is somebody who keeps expressing doubt. They might say, oh, well, that'll never work. We couldn't do it in the past, so why should we try it now? They might be putting down other people's contributions, or they might just have issues not being in control of the meeting. So in this instance, I think it's really important to go back to what is the course that you have charted? What are the goals that your group is trying to take on? And let's think about what we can do to address those goals. It's again about being constructive, adding contributions to ideas rather than just tearing them down. And another thing we can do here is to really focus on our wins, taking a step back, acknowledging your accomplishments, and really, congratulating the people who made it possible.
And
so, oh yeah, go for it.
Michael, thanks. Sorry. I promise you said I could do this. And one thing I just wanted to make sure that is really clear is, especially for the naysayer, it's not that they are just disagreeing with the idea, or they have issues with the suggestion that's being offered. It's that they're consistently making the meeting less productive by saying like, well, that's not going to work and I don't like it, after the group has already kind of all rallied around an idea or a project or a solution. So it isn't just that they're disagreeing, because that's something very different, and it's totally okay for people to disagree. But it's that naysaying where they're, really holding the group back from making progress. So yeah,
Yeah,
just
thank you, Teresa. That's a really good point. Disagreement is not conflict, right? We don't have to turn every disagreement into like a confrontation. Sometimes disagreements are just, I don't see it the same way. What we're talking about is if you're having difficulty moving through a meeting, then at that point it becomes disruptive. So if you are finding yourself still stuck with somebody, again, these are just some techniques that you can take to kind of be a little bit more intentional as a group leader or somebody who's facilitating a project, is really just to take a step back, accept that what they're saying might be right, and again, trying to find solutions for those issues that they're raising, trying to spend time discussing the issue with the group and seeing if you can collectively come to a decision. Sometimes when people hear that other members of the group agree with their points and just not their solutions, they can be more likely to agree with the group after that discussion has been had. The other thing is to defer, deferring to the membership of a group. How should we make this decision? Do we need to address it? Or, again, if you might need to decide you are out of order, that's something that you can defer to the membership of your group.
And when you are in the space of accepting what they're saying, and that maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, maybe it's their perspective, maybe their perspective is correct. When you're kind of in that space, another way that might help you, because just from what Michael was saying, like taking a step back, so it might help to take a step back, like you said, and just take a breath, and also offer some compassion for that person, even if you just do that internally. Um, they're speaking up or hijacking because they might be frustrated with something. They may have never felt heard before. So just, kind of keep that in mind, and that'll also help. That'll also help you to regulate your own reaction to it, because the last thing you want is two people getting into an argument. But yeah, just try to have some compassion for them. Sometimes if somebody's taking over, they may not be used to having a platform to speak their mind. So but yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. So we are going to run through a couple more things here. These are some steps for running an effective meeting, which really is, you have to consider a meeting more than just getting through an agenda, checking the boxes. It really is, if you're facilitating a meeting, you do have a responsibility to your group members and their well-being. So again, take care to attend to the group dynamics. If somebody feels like they are being ignored, then that can threaten the whole group. Just as Teresa was saying, if somebody is feeling like they're left out of a conversation, then that can derail a group, honestly. So a couple points to consider: planning the meeting. So making sure that you have considered what are the goals that we're trying to accomplish here, who needs to be in attendance. Sometimes there might be people who you could invite who could share more information about the topics you're discussing. So, if you're talking about, oh, well, what are we going to do about this cleanup? You might want to invite somebody from the engagement hub or from the blight office in the city to attend that meeting so that they can share with you some of what they've done to make that type of activity successful. And then really considering what needs to be on the agenda. This is a good opportunity to connect with other group members and to make sure that they feel like they have a say in what the meeting is going to cover. You can do this either at the end of the last meeting or just as a way to sort of check base with folks in between meetings. The next step is to actually run the meeting. So obviously we went over a lot of the facilitation technique. Oh, I'm sorry, Teresa.
Oh, I was just gonna give you
Sorry.
a gentle time check.
Yep. Yeah, no, we're just about finished here. So thank you. So running the meeting, again, I know that this is pretty basic stuff, but I think it's just important for us to kind of, you know, remember every now and then that there are some different ways that we can approach our meetings. So introductions can be a really great way to get to know each other, form bonds. Thinking of icebreakers, maybe icebreakers better than what's your favorite candy. You can get creative with it. Um, it's also important to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So again, creating that sort of group participation agreement. Um, you know, just making sure that everybody is buying into the way that you're conducting the meeting. Um, if things get off topic, you can kindly but firmly ask to get back on the topic. Um, again, people don't want to be in a meeting that they feel like is, we're just talking in circles, or we're always going into side trails that don't lead anywhere. That can make somebody not come back, right? So making sure that you are staying to what you're trying to accomplish. And the last thing is, before moving on to the next topic, summarize what you've heard, what decisions have been made. Make sure that everybody understands these are our next steps. Again, just to create that common understanding. This is what we're dealing with. And then lastly, following up on your meeting. So just because the meeting is over doesn't mean your work is over. You can send out your meeting minutes or notes to the participants. That can help if people weren't able to attend the meeting. It can help people still feel like they're involved and that they understand what's going on. It also can, kind of keep people accountable. If you're sending out a message saying, and Michael said that he was going to do X, Y, and Z before the next meeting. If you really put that out there for everybody to see, Michael better come to the next meeting with X, Y, and Z. This one is a little, it might seem obvious, but I found it is actually really effective. Using bold or uppercase when you're describing specific action items that you need people to see, that can be pretty effective. And lastly, just checking in with folks every now and then, just on a one-on-one basis, seeing if they have any suggestions, just getting general feedback. How do you feel these meetings are going? Do you have any suggestions on what we might be able to do to make it more effective? Things like that. Again, just sort of trying to connect with people and figuring out where they're at. So that was a lot of information. There is a lot more in this packet, but again, I think it's pretty. I think I did a pretty good job of making it understandable and comprehensible. Well, still comprehensive. So do take a look at those. So just as we did before the session, we are going to ask you the question. I am familiar with the various ways that organizations can deliberate on important decisions. If you definitely agree to this, that is letter A. Mostly is letter B. Not sure is letter C. Mostly not is D. And if you definitely are not familiar with the various ways the organization can deliberate on important decisions, which I hope you aren't, because nobody was before. So fingers crossed. Let's go ahead and see. Beautiful. All right. So our not sures have moved into mostly, and hopefully some of those mostlies have moved up to definitely. And again, still have questions. We got our beautiful packet there. All right, awesome. Feel good about those results. Our next question is, I would feel comfortable dealing with a member of my organization who's acting in a disruptive or inappropriate manner during our meetings. This is maybe a little bit more of a difficult question because you can't ever really feel comfortable about something until you've done it. So maybe that's not quite the right phrasing, but if you feel like you would be able to deal with somebody more comfortably. Let's go ahead and see those responses. All right, so we still have some mostly nots, understandably. But it looks like we are edging up on the yeses, so that's good to see. And again, I think that I'm again gonna shout out Ashley and the Engagement Hub. They do a really great job helping groups sort of problem solve some of these issues. So if you do find yourself, you know, continuing to be unable to come to positive decision making, definitely reach out to the Engagement Hub and they can help out with some of that. And then last thing before I sign off for the night, I do just want to come back to this slide and thinking again about if you can think of ways to deal with difficult personalities. I'm just going to leave this up. So if you do have any thoughts and you'd like to share those, you can please feel free to do that right now. And with that, I will throw it over to Ashley.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. I think we're gonna move right into the next presentation. I don't see any questions in the chat. But if you do have any questions about this presentation or any comments that you want to share, feel free to pop them in the chat. And then the next conversation rolls right into opportunities to manage conflict and how to resolve conflict when it does arise. So some of these same principles that we talked about during this meeting can be discussed during our breakout sessions during the next meeting.